You've heard the name Judas. The traitor. The one who sold out Jesus with a kiss. But what if I told you, there's more to his story than just betrayal? A mind tormented by guilt, a soul crumbling under the weight of regret. This is not just the story of a villain. This is the psychology of Judas. Welcome to Psyche of Faith, where we explore the emotional and psychological layers of biblical characters through a modern lens. If you're searching for deeper meaning behind ancient stories, you're in the right place. Judas Iscariot. His name is synonymous with betrayal across cultures and centuries. But behind the title of traitor, there was a man, flesh and blood, doubts and desires. One of the 12 disciples, Judas wasn't an outsider. He walked with Jesus, heard every parable, witnessed every miracle. He wasn't some dark figure lurking on the margins. He was at the center of the movement. That fact alone complicates his legacy. What causes a close follower to betray the very person they dedicated their life to? What happens in the soul of someone who chooses 30 silver coins over loyalty? This is where psychology meets scripture. Many scholars believe Judas was driven not by simple greed, but by disappointment. Perhaps he expected a Messiah who would rise with political power, overthrow Roman oppression, and take control. Jesus, instead, preached humility, sacrifice, and suffering. This may have created cognitive dissonance within Judas, a tension between what he believed the Messiah should be and who Jesus actually was. When expectations collapse, the human mind can spiral. When our ideals fall apart, we look for someone to blame. For Judas, that someone was Jesus. Judas's betrayal didn't emerge from nowhere. It was the product of internal tension, conflicting desires, unmet expectations, and a deepening sense of alienation. He may have felt increasingly out of sync with the other disciples, with the direction Jesus was taking. He likely masked this inner conflict with silence, growing colder inside. The more he smiled outwardly, the more fractured he became inwardly. This duplicity, this psychological split, is something many of us know too well. When who we are on the outside no longer reflects who we are within, something begins to rot. When Judas decided to go to the chief priests and accept the silver, it wasn't a sudden impulse, it was a culmination. Imagine the mental state required to hand over your teacher, your friend, to death. This wasn't just a transactional betrayal, it was a rupture of identity. By that point, Judas had disconnected emotionally. He might have felt trapped. Or perhaps he convinced himself he was forcing Jesus into revealing his true power. Whatever the reason, the moment he kissed Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane was the climax of a psychological tragedy. But the tragedy doesn't end with betrayal. Judas didn't walk away untouched. Scripture says he was seized with remorse. He tried to return the money. He confessed. "I have sinned," he said. "I have betrayed innocent blood." These aren't the words of a cold-blooded villain. They're the cries of a tormented soul. In that moment, Judas was drowning in shame. Regret flooded his mind like a storm. He couldn't undo what was done. And for him, the weight of that guilt became unbearable. Psychologically, shame is one of the most destructive emotions. Unlike guilt, which says I did something bad, shame says I am bad. Judas wasn't just feeling regret. He was collapsing under self-loathing. He couldn't find a path to redemption. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't run back to the disciples. He didn't fall at the foot of the cross. He turned inward, and the darkness consumed him. This, right here, is the pivotal difference between Judas and Peter, another disciple who also betrayed Jesus. One drowned in shame. The other found grace. Imagine if Judas had lived one more day. Imagine if he had seen Jesus resurrected. Imagine if he had wept at the empty tomb. Would he have found restoration? Would his name have been redeemed like Peter's? This what if hangs heavy in his story. The tragedy is not just that Judas betrayed Jesus, it's that he didn't wait for grace. He didn't believe he could be forgiven. He couldn't see past his failure. And that's a psychological trap so many people fall into today. They think their mistake is final. But grace, if waited on, still arrives. Judas is more than a historical figure, he's a mirror. How many of us have betrayed what we once believed in? How many of us have let our expectations turn into resentment? How many of us carry guilt so heavy we can't breathe? Judas reflects the darker parts of the human experience: our fears, our self-sabotage, our need for control, and our brokenness when we lose it. In him, we see not just betrayal, we see ourselves on the edge of regret. And in that reflection, we are invited to choose differently. Judas teaches us that the mind, when overwhelmed by guilt and shame, can become a prison. Without release, without confession, without the hope of healing, the psyche implodes. Isolation intensifies the pain. In silence, the mind creates stories: I am beyond saving. No one could ever forgive me. These thoughts snowball until reality distorts. Judas likely believed there was no road back. That belief, not just the act, is what led to his death. It's a powerful reminder of how vital grace, community, and hope are for mental health. There's a Judas in all of us. A part that makes poor choices. A part that wrestles with expectations unmet. A part that betrays even our own values. But there's also a part in us that can return, that can cry out for mercy, that can heal. Judas's story warns us of what happens when we give in to despair. But it also shows us what happens when we lose sight of grace. We may walk a dark path, but as long as we're breathing, the story isn't over. And neither was his. Had he waited just one more day? Regret is universal. We all look back at moments we wish we could rewrite. Things we said, choices we made, doors we closed. But regret alone doesn't define the end of a story. It's what we do with it that matters. Judas let his regret isolate him. He allowed it to whisper lies, telling him there was no redemption, no second chance, no way forward. But Scripture shows us countless examples of people who failed and were still restored. What Judas lacked wasn't remorse, it was belief in mercy. And without that belief, remorse turns toxic. Healing begins when we confront the truth about what we've done, but it continues when we believe there's still love for us in spite of it. Judas confronted his sin. He admitted it. That's more than many ever do. But then he stopped there. He didn't go further into confession, into community, into grace. Psychologically, healing requires movement, out of isolation and into connection. For us today, that means opening up, sharing the pain, seeking support, and believing that we are not our worst moment. Because we never are. Peter also betrayed Jesus. He denied him 3 times, even after promising loyalty unto death. But Peter's story ended differently, not because he was a better person, but because he allowed himself to be found. When Jesus rose, Peter ran to the tomb. Later, he wept openly. He allowed himself to be questioned, restored, and loved. The difference between Peter and Judas wasn't the level of sin, it was the level of surrender. Peter surrendered his shame. Judas surrendered to it. That choice changed everything. Judas's story reminds us how shame festers when kept hidden. In the shadows of the mind, shame distorts reality. You begin to believe that your failure is your identity. That lie grows louder in isolation. Judas didn't talk to the other disciples. He didn't seek counsel. He didn't stay near Jesus during trial. Shame made him retreat, and that retreat made the burden unbearable. Modern psychology affirms this. When we isolate ourselves in our pain, our thoughts become toxic. But vulnerability, connection, and truth, they begin the healing process. It's heartbreaking to realize Judas never heard Jesus say, "I forgive you." But what if he had asked? There's no evidence that Jesus would have refused him. After all, he forgave the ones who crucified him. He forgave Peter. He forgave the thief on the cross. Judas never even gave grace a chance to respond. And that's where many fall today. They assume the answer is no, so they never ask. But healing begins the moment you dare to ask, "Could I be forgiven?" And heaven's answer is often a resounding, yes. You might be carrying something like Judas, a regret that eats at you, a decision you wish you could undo, a moment you replay over and over in your mind. But this story isn't just about him. It's about you. You don't have to end your chapter the way he did. The same Jesus who extended grace to Peter would have extended it to Judas, and still extends it to you. Even in the deepest betrayal, the most painful fall, there is always a road back. It won't erase the past, but it will redeem the future. Judas carried his regret like a boulder on his back, and it crushed him. But grace is lighter. It doesn't deny the weight of what we've done, it just says we don't have to carry it alone. The choice between regret and redemption is subtle, but it's everything. One path leads to despair, the other to restoration. Judas teaches us this powerful lesson. You can feel regret and still miss redemption. But you don't have to. You can still turn around. The story is only over if you stop walking. If there's a Judas in you, a part that hides guilt, avoids confession, or carries shame, it's time to be honest. Time to name it. To face it. To say it out loud. What have you betrayed? What truth have you sold out for comfort or fear? This isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. Confession isn't weakness. It's the first step toward healing. The longer you wait, the louder the shame becomes. But the moment you break the silence, light begins to flood in. And with it, healing. Judas isn't just a villain. He's a cautionary tale of what happens when we give in to despair and refuse to believe in grace. But he's also a mirror. He reminds us that we are all capable of both failure and redemption. We're all just one step away from either path. His story leaves us with a question. When we fall, which voice will we listen to? The voice of shame or the voice of grace? Judas listened to the wrong one. But you don't have to. In the garden, a kiss became a sword. In the courtroom, silence became a verdict. And on the tree, regret became a noose. But beyond the grave, grace was waiting. Not just for Peter. Maybe even for Judas. And most certainly, for you. If this story stirred something in you, let it take root. Let it move you toward honesty, healing, and hope. Subscribe to Psyche of Faith for more journeys into the minds behind the pages of Scripture. Because every soul has a story, even the ones history calls villains. And every story, when touched by grace, can be rewritten.